Gunther is currently a research fellow at the Mendelssohn Center for European Jewish Studies at Potsdam University, and he's at the group Société Religion La Cité at the CNRS, which is the most prestigious research center in France. And he's also, I'm happy to say, a senior research fellow at ISGAP. And thanks to Gunther and the great work that he's doing, ISGAP opened a program in December at the Sorbonne and the CNRS, thanks to the hard work of Gunther, and not only the hard work of Gunther, but I think it's picking of the fruit from many, many years of research and working on these issues. I met Gunther, it's like almost 10 years ago. He's a fellow traveler and somebody who's been fighting anti-Semitism and bigotry through his high-quality research for many years. So it's really a pleasure to welcome Gunther, who just flew in, and we're going to have a short conversation with Gunther. He'll speak about his book. The topic of his lecture tonight is Muslim anti-Semitism in France and in Western Europe. So Gunther.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to speak here and to you, and thanks for the invitation. And it's not true that it's on my initiative. It's your initiative also in France and also in Rome. There's a new program in universities in France and in Italy to make the study of anti-Semitism an issue. It has become more and more clear in recent years that anti-Semitism is a very important issue to fight against and also to do research about, because only if we understand what we face, we can combat it, and we have to understand it in depth, and we have to understand it in the current forms and the current manifestations, because anti-Semitism is a very old hatred, but it's changing and the forms are changing. With the recent attacks in France and Copenhagen, and previously also in other places, it has become clear to many that anti-Semitism is a rising problem, a very serious security concern for the Jewish communities, of course, but also for European societies in general. And some politicians have recognized that, but as for now, not enough. Some, as Manuel Valls, you might know, the French Prime Minister, he speaks out against anti-Semitism in very clear words, but the government should do more, and it's not enough. And we have to understand where it's coming from. So anti-Semitism for Muslims is only one part of it, but it's an important part of it. It is not easy to put down the numbers exactly, because I can show you only statistics here from France. You see there a rise of anti-Semitism over the years. You go here from 1994 to the right, 2014. And you see that there is a rise in anti-Semitic incidents and a rise also in the year 2014. And what is difficult to see here is, but it's in the numbers here. These are the violent acts. So unfortunately, not only the numbers of anti-Semitic acts have increased, but very much so the violent acts. Compared to the 1990s, that's a huge increase. And now in France, it's difficult to estimate how many of these anti-Semitic acts and violent acts, how many of these perpetrators are Muslim or non-Muslim. But estimations go about half of the perpetrators in France are Muslim. And if you think of the violent acts, at least the terrorist acts in the recent years, all of them were Muslims. In Germany, you have also terrorists from the far right who try to, for example, put a bomb in Munich. But there was in 2003 but the terrorist threat, the most terrorist threat against Jewish communities comes from Muslim perpetrators. You can also see that in well, I cannot go through all these slides because we don't have time now, and I want to give you the opportunity to also ask questions. But you can see that from different surveys. That was a survey done by an agency from the European Union. They asked about 5,600 Jews about their experiences, and those who had been harassed or had experienced anti-Semitic violence or threats, they were asked to say what they think, what was the profile of the perpetrators. And you see clearly that Muslims were the greatest, the category with the most people said they were of Muslim background. And interesting also that you see here from the left, there were more perpetrators than from the right. And this is only an average of these 8 countries, Belgium, France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Sweden, and the UK. Some have questioned that there is a difference between the general population and Muslims in the attitudes towards Jews. And we've seen now from many surveys, and ISGAP just published a review I did of surveys. It's on the website if you're more interested in that, of surveys. You make the distinction of anti-Semitic attitudes among Muslims and non-Muslims. And you can see in all these surveys that there is a difference. You see, this is a survey did here in 3 countries. You see that in UK, 7% of the overall population had negative view of Jews, and 44% of the Muslim sample. So there's a huge difference. And Germany was staggering. 22% of the general population said they have a negative view of Jews, and 44% among the Muslim population in Germany. And in France, 13 to 28. I won't go through these different surveys, but we can see if we look into correlations, is that related to what? It's related often in correlations, at least, to religiosity. Sorry, to the higher you the people indicate their religiosity, the higher the anti-Semitic attitudes are. And also, the more fundamentalist the interpretations of Islam are, the higher the anti-Semitic attitudes. And what these surveys also found is also interesting. It's not related to discrimination or perceived discrimination, what is often said. This is not what the surveys say. It is not related to legal restrictions of Islamic practice. In France, for example, you have more restrictions on Islamic practice than, let's say, in the UK. But it's not related to that. It's not related to socioeconomic variables. So I won't go through that. But the question I have, and I think it is important to look really in depth into that, if somebody says he has or she has a negative opinion of Jews, then my question is why? So there is no good reason, we know that. It's bigotry, but why did they say it? What is the justification? If we want to combat it, we have to know what the tropes are. So what we can see, and I gave many examples in this book, how it is articulated, what people say. So what we can see that this is a study with young men, Muslim men in the UK, in Germany, and in France, and we can find these 4 categories of justification. So we can find very classic anti-Semitic stereotypes like conspiracy theories. Jews have too much influence in the business world, Jews run the world, or Jews are all very rich, and so on. This is common among many. And then we have another category that is related to Israel. And that is often comes in the term Jews kill children. And very often, in most cases, young Muslims do not distinguish between Israelis and Jews. So it's the Jews kill children, which is often, I mean, if you read the press, then it's different. In European newspapers, you read Israeli soldiers kill children in that way. But if you ask young people, they say Jews kill the children. And very often it's understood at that also in the newspapers, but this is another discussion. And it is also interesting if you go, I don't have time really to go into that, but you also find it in the book, that it's not about if there is a negative view of Israel, it's a demonized view of Israel, which these Jews kill or Israelis kill children. If Israelis really do that, killing children on purpose, they are evil. So this is the demonization of Israel, of course. And it's also what becomes clear if you look into the justifications, it's not about borders. It's not about some settlements. It's not about some control or petrol controls. It's about Israel's existence in itself. And the third category is not related at all to Israel, and often not even to classic anti-Semitic stereotypes. It is related to ethnic and religious identities or Islam itself. So it comes that obviously not all Muslims, I always have to say that if we also look on surveys, if in some surveys we see almost, in the French survey for example, 46% of Muslims can be seen as having many anti-Semitic attitudes. So it's almost half of the Muslim population. We see the other half does not have these attitudes. So it's always not everybody and not all Muslims. So, but here in this third category, we see young men arguing that they say Jews and Muslims have always been enemies, and I, as a Muslim, therefore don't like Jews. This kind of essentialization is done, and this goes also with an Arab identity, as saying Arabs hate Jews, and therefore I also, because I'm Arab, don't like Jews. We have to know that in Europe, I didn't have time to go really into the details, but in Europe, Muslims come from very different backgrounds, right? Some are Arabs, but this is the case in France. The majority of them come from Maghreb countries, so from Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia. But in Germany, most Muslims have a Turkish background. And in the UK, Muslims have a background from today's India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So it's a very different background. And the fourth category, I think, is the maybe most revealing but also the most frightening one, is that for many they don't feel the need of a justification. And there you can also find many examples here on in this book. They don't need a justification. For them it's just normal not to like Jews or to hate even Jews. And you find it also in language that at least in France and in Germany, and also other studies have shown that the word Jew itself has become an insult on schoolyards. So it is like, if this is an insult, it's understood that's something negative. So it's very difficult also then, if it's such a norm, even in the language, for students or young people to resist that if it's so much in the language. Because if they stand up and say, no, don't call anybody a Jew, meaning in a negative way, they are very easily then targeted as being Jewish themselves, even if they're not. Jew is just, it is very difficult maybe to understand that, but it's a common practice in many schoolyards today. It's just used as an insult among all non-Jews, right? Even if in the school there's not a single Jew, it is often used as an insult. So, but that leads me to something I want to say also, that we also found anti-Semites. And this is maybe the most interesting chapter in this book. Why do some people stand up in an environment and saying, I don't like what my friend said about Jews? I had one interview saying, my father said he wished me to be a martyr and to go to Israel and blow as many Jews up as I can. And he responded, as he said in the interview at least, he responded saying, well, he stood up against his father saying, I cannot kill innocent people, I don't want to kill myself, and nobody should be hurt or discriminated against for any religious or racial or any kind of this reason. So we have also people standing up, and I think we have to identify them, to support them, and maybe understand better where it's coming from, and then help in education to fight this bigotry. It's a big topic. You can see some factors of influence here, and school is an important influence still. I don't know if you're aware of the education system in European countries, which is very diverse and different. Family and friends are important, media, but maybe we can leave that to the discussions, because I think we have to go on, and I'm very happy to expand on any of the questions you might have. I just want to finish with conclusions that it is, I think, it would be a mistake to try to identify one single source of anti-Semitism in general or anti-Semitism among Muslims. There are many different sources, and all the individuals who believe in anti-Semitic stereotypes and act on that, they all have different rationales, and we have to analyze them all. But it also has become clear that the Muslim anti-Semitism we face cannot be reduced to anger toward Israeli politics. That is often done in newspapers, even by politicians. But this is not what research shows. And there's also no direct relation between experiences of discrimination and anti-Semitism. And I'm happy to go into detail if you're interested. But there is often a fantasy of an alleged global war against the Muslims, which some, again I say, not all, not even the majority, but some Muslims buy that they think there is a global war against all Muslims in the world. And this often includes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, because who then is responsible for the global war against the Muslims? It is either the United States, and often in cooperation with the Jews. And what we also can see, that certain perceptions, and I say certain perceptions, of Islam and the Muslim identity, they include even hatred against Jews. So thank you very much. I hope that we can have a debate I'm not sure how long that is going to be, but we have, I think, 10 minutes. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Did you find in your research that the academic discipline of Middle East studies is a major source of anti-Semitism amongst Muslims and non-Muslims in Europe?
And this is David Silverstein, who runs ASMIA. ASMIA, excuse me. It's a group of scholars dealing with issues in the Middle East from a more fair perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that question. It is. Sorry? Okay. So the question was: are the Middle Eastern studies in Europe important for antisemitism among Muslims? I think it's less important than here in the United States, because they are not very influential directly. They're influential maybe on the intellectuals, but most of the Muslims in Europe, they're not directly influenced by the academic debates.
What about among non-Muslims?
Yeah. Again, these Middle Eastern centers are often biased when it comes to Israel particularly, and they also have often excused antisemitism among Muslims, but they are, as far as I can see, not very influential in the political debate. But they're not doing, most of them are not doing good, that's right.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
It's helpful that your name is Jikeli, because you're not sounding like a Jewish name, and it's been seen with several Jewish filmmakers. They come from France or from Germany, and although they may be Jewish, in fact they are Jewish, because they came from France and Germany, and they were perceived as anti-Semitic to begin with, because France and Germany are both anti-Semitic in the perception of many people. They were able to do the research better than were the people who are perceived, like with my name, Dreyfus or Schwartz or something like that. So it's more easy for you to do research, possibly, because you have a neutral name that doesn't give away the store.
Well, we were doing the interviews with a group of interviewers.
Can you repeat the question?
So, oh yes, the question. The question was, does my name help me to do the research? So, indirect interaction with the interviewees, that wasn't too important, because I mean you can give any name, and I always gave only my first name, and we were a group of interviewers. So we didn't see any differences. We had 2 female interviewers and 2 male interviewers and 2 Muslim interviewers and 2 non-Muslim interviewers. So that didn't affect much the interviews. Then afterwards, in presenting the research, I'm not sure if that might help to have a non-Jewish background, but I am confident that it's the quality of research that counts, and yeah, we should present the results we find.
But you know, reality is that if you're perceived as skewing Jewish, that it won't be perceived the same way. The same information will be perceived as half empty and not half full.
Yeah.
And it's the same information.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Yes.
I kind of disagree with that, because in my experience, a lot of Jews here, when they run for office, they're so defensive about being Jewish that they bend over backwards, and they're not very pro-Israel, and they have to show the world how fair and balanced they are. So
That's not the same thing.
So that was a comment.
I'm going to interject. Let's try to focus the questions on Gunther's presentation and the issue of the book, if it's possible.
I think that, yeah.
Sorry.
Wait, after the people who were interviewed, were they born in Europe and descended from immigrants, or were they immigrants themselves?
Yeah, most of them were born in Europe. Yes. Not all of them, but most of them were born in Europe. You find it detailed in the back. I think there is a list, but yeah.
So from what you presented, and I recognize it as just a very small piece of your research, but the fact that the fundamentalists have the more entrenched, extreme anti-Semitic views, or at least at a higher ratio.
That's right.
Would you suggest that there's like something fruitful to be gained by interfaith dialogue? Like, how do you propose, if you have, sorry, it's a big question, what do you recommend? I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to try to, you're not going to
Yeah.
defeat them by strength. You have to really try.
Yeah, I mean, yes. The question was, what do we do? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. And seeing that the fundamentalists that they have the highest percentage of those who have anti-Semitic ideas.
Are they the greatest percentage of the population?
No, it is of the Muslim population. You want to say yes? No, it is. It depends always on how you define them fundamentalists, but it is the what we can see is that among the Muslim organizations in Europe, many of them, if not the majority of the Muslim organizations in Europe, are influenced by Islamist organizations, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, or in Germany, Milli-Görüş, which was founded by Erbakan, who was a fierce anti-Semite. He died in 2012, I think. So you have this influence of Islamist organizations in Europe, and the governments in Europe have worked with them for a long time, have even given them subsidies for work with Jews, which I think is a very bad thing. So that needs to stop, for example. If you look, then there are surveys asking Muslims if they feel represented by the Muslim organizations. And only less than half of them do feel represented by any of the Muslim organizations. So from there you conclude that it's not the majority, but often they present themselves as being representative. In the UK, for example, but also in France and in Germany, and it has, because the Islamist organizations, they are political organizations, they are driven, they have an agenda, and they are motivated, and they want, I mean, like in Germany, they fight for Muslim education in schools. So this is another thing where we should see what is then taught in school, what kind of image of Islam is taught in school. And then also, if I know a recent survey of school books in Germany on the image of Israel, and it's a very biased image of Israel in German school books. So we have to work on that as well. We have to challenge Islamist organizations in Europe not to fund their work with students, but to challenge them on, for example, Holocaust Memorial Day. Some Muslim organizations in the UK boycotted explicitly Holocaust Memorial Day in the UK. So there need to be consequences afterwards in the political interaction, and so on. So I think there are concrete steps, and in education, I think this is where we can, or where governments at least can do most, from an early on, to have a non-biased education. This is already to cut the bias that there is.
On that note, I'm sorry. We're gonna have to cut it short because Gunther and I are actually speaking at the JCC. There's an important film tonight about Ilan Halemi and his gruesome murder in Paris in 2006. There's a film called, I think it's After 24 Hours?
It's 24 hours.
24 hours, sorry.
Days.
24 days. You're right. 24 days. And it's playing around New York, and I'd really recommend you seeing it. I saw it last week, and it's a very important film and a powerful film, and it goes back to what we were speaking about earlier, about the Islamist, not Islam and not Muslims, but radical political Islamism, and how they're using and I'm choosing my words carefully, genocidal anti-Semitism to further their political aspirations. And we see the Halemi case as really an alarm for the fact that jihadist, genocidal anti-Semitism is on the streets of Europe. It was in 2006. And if we understand what we're facing today, the idea of a random act at the Delhi would never have entered into our vocabulary, that we really have to understand the mind of our enemy and to confront it, and as Gunther said, through serious research, to say things that are not politically correct. I mean, Gunther, in a way, is through very serious scientific research, is saying things that is not politically correct. And we have to, at the highest academic standards, at the highest caliber of serious scholarship, really search for the truth. And I think what Gunther did is brave and very important, and we all have to follow Gunther's example and really be brave in following the truth and speaking truth to power and speaking about things that are not, even in the United States, and perhaps even especially in the United States at this moment, that are not politically correct to say. And we have to speak the truth. And Gunther is a great example, and this book is a very important contribution to the fight for truth. So, thank you. Thank you. And not only the hard work of Gunther, but I think it's the fruit, picking of the fruit from many, many years of research and working on these issues. I met Gunther, it's like almost 10 years ago. He's a fellow traveler and somebody who's been fighting anti-Semitism and bigotry through his high-quality research for many years. So it's really a pleasure to welcome Gunther, who just flew in, and we're going to have a short conversation with Gunther. He'll speak about his book. The topic of his lecture tonight is Muslim anti-Semitism in France and in Western Europe. So Gunther.
Thank you very much. We have to understand it in the current forms and the current manifestations, because anti-Semitism is a very old hatred, but it's changing and the forms are changing. With the recent attacks in France and Copenhagen and previously also in other places, it has become clear to many that anti-Semitism is a rising problem, a very serious security concern for the Jewish communities, of course, but also for European societies in general. And some politicians have recognized that, but as for now, not enough. Some, as Manuel Valls, you might know, the French Prime Minister, he speaks out against anti-Semitism in very clear words, but the government should do more, and it's not enough. And we have to understand where it's coming from. So anti-Semitism for Muslims is only one part of it, but it's an important part of it. It is not easy to put down the numbers exactly, because I can show you only statistics here from France. You see there a rise of anti-Semitism over the years.
Gunther is currently a research fellow at the Mendelssohn Center for European Jewish Studies at Potsdam University, and he's at the group Société Religion La Cité at the CNRS, which is the most prestigious research center in France. And he's also, I'm happy to say, a senior research fellow at ISGAP. And thanks to Gunther and the great work that he's doing, ISGAP opened a program in December at the Sorbonne and the CNRS, thanks to the hard work of Gunther.
Very much. It's really an honor to speak here and to you, and thanks for the invitation. And it's not true that it's on my initiative. It's your initiative also in France and also in Rome. There's a new program in universities in France and in Italy to make the study of anti-Semitism an issue. It has become more and more clear in recent years that anti-Semitism is a very important issue to fight against and also to do research about, because only if we understand what we face, we can combat it, and we have to understand it in depth.